Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Mystery Theory. Today, it's going to be a soft-spoken video, and we're going to cover the case that is known as the girl in the box. If you're new around here, you're wondering why slow pace or soft speaking. This is an ASMR channel that covers true crime cases. So if you don't enjoy it, you find it annoying, or anything of that nature, please exit this video now. Now, for those of you who want more content, I have a Patreon where you can get 4 videos a month for $5. So, if you want more, or you want to support the channel, please visit my page with the link down below. If you want to watch my videos ad-free to add to the ASMR idea, then please check out my membership where you can listen to all videos ad-free. Now, in 1977, hitchhiking in the US was a typical thing, especially for young girls. I have to say that even today I see young girls and boys trying to catch a ride where we are at least once a week. I assume is the endless trails, backpacking trips with the milder winter weather, but I don't think it was something that was done exclusively back in the late 70s. At the time, Clean Stan was one of those free-spirited girl in her 20s. She was hitchhiking her way from Eugene, Oregon to Northern California, this small town by the name of Westwood. She was going there to surprise a friend for her birthday. After accepting rides with truckers down I-5, she actually made it to Red Bluff, California. There, she needed to change onto Highway 36. Catching a ride in a big interstate like I-5, it's easier than trying to catch a ride in a smaller local highway. It happens all the time. I-5 goes from Washington State border with Canada to all the way down California and the border with Mexico. So it's one of those highways that travels fast, has a lot of truckers because of the commercial transporting, and lots, at least on the Oregon side, lots of nice rest areas. So it is easier to catch a truck driver who would want to get you closer to your destination. But on Highway 36 was kind of different, and she would have to more than likely find a vehicle, like a car, truck, somebody that was driving down that route. So she decided to wait at the on-ramp to Highway 36. She was offered a few rides, but she was kind of cautious, and they looked like trouble. So finally, this couple stopped and offered her a ride. Their names, Cameron and Janice Hooker. She felt safe enough with this couple. Cameron looked nerdy with big 70s style, I guess, eyeglasses. And Janice had a 2-month-old baby in her arms. So Colleen accepted their offer. During the ride, they almost had no conversation at all. Not even between the couple. Cameron just kept glancing at her in the rear view mirror, and Colleen started to feel a little bit uncomfortable. They had to stop at this gas station, so Colleen went to use the restroom. She had this feeling inside her telling her that she should find another ride. But she was so close to her destination that she decided to continue the ride with the couple. A bit further down the road, Cameron asked if it was okay if they made a stop to see some ice caves just off the main highway. Colleen said she wasn't in a hurry. They drove down a dirt road for a while, then stopped, and the couple walked down to a creek, and Colleen stayed in the car. All of a sudden, Cameron jumped into the back seat of the car with her, handcuffed her, blindfolded her, and shoved a gag into her mouth. Then he forced her head into a large wooden box. The wooden box was a homemade device called a sensory deprivation head box. It was large and heavy, with two sides to it that were hinged together at the top like a clamshell, and the hole at the bottom just big enough for her neck to fit through. The inside of the box was coated with carpet to help muffle the screams. At this point, Colleen was lying helpless in the back seat. When her car finally stopped, when the car finally stopped, Cameron removed the box from her head and took her inside a house and into the basement. There, he removed her clothes and blindfolded her. He forced Colleen to stand on a metal ice chest while he bound her wrists with leather restraints, which were connected to hooks on a ceiling beam. He then pulled out the ice chest from beneath her, leaving her suspended from the ceiling by her wrists. He started whipping her back with a leather whip while she kicked and screamed. However, as he was doing this, a gap in her blindfold could let see Colleen. A magazine with a photo of a woman strapped up like she was. Cameron was acting out his fantasy from a BDSM magazine. After a while, he let her rest her toes on a box while Cameron and Janice had sex while looking at her. Colleen was screaming her head off, but Cameron would yell back at her, "Go ahead and scream. I will cut your vocal cords out. Don't tempt me. I've done it before." Colleen actually believed he was capable of that. The year prior, another girl in the area named Marie Spanik went missing, and Janice later revealed that the couple had kidnapped her as well. Apparently, for Marie, it was a dead end because Cameron couldn't control himself and killed her after one day. For Colleen, the torture went for hours until he finally let her sit naked on the ice chest. He then put the wooden sensory box, deprivation box, back on her head. Later, in a larger wooden box about the size of a coffin, chained her wrists together and tied her feet to the corners of the box. Apparently, Cameron was very busy building this homemade bondage devices. The next day, he put Colleen on another one he called the rack. He chained her wrists and ankles to the corners of the rack and left her there until the next day. On the third day, Cameron tried to feed Colleen, but she couldn't keep anything down. This only angered him, so he decided to hang her by her wrists and then whipped her more. Then he attached her to the rack again. By the end of the week, Colleen's roommates were worried. She never showed up at her friends or came back home, so they called her family in Riverside, California, and the family began searching for her. They drove 900 miles from Riverside, California to Eugene, Oregon, stopping at every single town along the way to report Colleen as missing. Nothing came out of that, so they returned to Riverside. In the meantime, Colleen was was naked, chained to the rack, and wearing the headbox for the entire first week. Over the next 5 months, Cameron kept Colleen naked in the box. She was let out once every evening to go to the bathroom, eat, and drink. All of this while Cameron was watching. During the first several months, he would take her out of the box for his sadistic pleasures. Whip her, choke her, shock her, burning her genitals, put her head underwater. Colleen later would recall that she was whipped at least 90 times during the first 6 months. In October 1977, Cameron built another box. This was a triangle shape that fit neatly beneath the stairs he called the workshop. So Colleen spent the next 6 months chained and locked inside the workshop. Then they started to let her out to do chores around the house. But Cameron's sick idea of pleasure was always working in his head, and he built another device he called the stretcher. And as you can probably imagine, this would stretch her arms and legs, which caused permanent damage to her back and shoulders. His mental manipulation of Colleen really took effect when he told her of an underground organization of slave owners, and the name was the Company. According to Cameron, the Company was a powerful organization that watched all of her movements very closely. He said that the members were everywhere, and that any slave that were caught trying to escape were going to be taken from their current masters and sold to other masters that could be much worse to them. She believed him, but it was actually a work of fiction that he had read about in one of his magazines. Over the next years, he expanded on the company story, making her more afraid of them. When his wife Janice had knee surgery and came home with a bandage on her knee, Cameron explained to Colleen that Janice had once been a slave who tried to escape. He also told Colleen that they torture her for trying to escape, and that's how she damaged her legs. Apparently, as you can probably imagine too, this was not true, but she certainly endured his sexual craziness, so much so that she was currently experiencing the consequences. Janice was not happy with it. She wanted to have more of a normal relationship. She wanted to have a baby, so she actually made an agreement with her husband. She could have a baby, and he could have his sexual slave under one condition. He was not to have sex with his slave. Sex was reserved for his wife exclusively. Clean enslavement would go through different stages, and in January 1978, a new stage was about to begin. This one would involve a contract, slave contract. This contract was an official document stating that she was his slave and that he owned, listen to this, her soul. He wouldn't come up with this idea. This was not his original idea, but it came out of a bondage magazine. Clean refused to sign it, but he explained that a representative of the company was waiting for the signed contract. Once the contract was signed, Colleen's name was changed to Kay, her slave name, and she was to address Cameron as Sir or Master, and to Janice as Ma'am. She would have to bow down, kneel, and even ask for permission before doing anything at all. She was given a leather collar with a steel ring that was placed around her neck, so she could never forget she was a slave. He pierced her labia as a symbol for slavery. Though Cameron had an agreement with Janice that he wouldn't have sex with a slave, Janice ended up suggesting he had sex with Colleen. She thought it might excite her if she watched him without Colleen's consent. It didn't work, and it actually made her jealous. This continued to happen against Colleen's will. Colleen had been doing this thing where she retreated to the confines of her mind, and she learned that she could travel anywhere with her mind. That was her coping mechanism. Colleen cried every day, but she would never let Cameron see her cry. In April 1978, the couple moved from their small house into a mobile home on an acre of land nearby. This began the third stage. In the new home, Cameron built a new box for Colleen that would double as a pedestal. This would be, I guess, under, it was like a pedestal that the waterbed would rest on. So she lived in a small box just beneath where they slept and had their business. He only allowed her to have a bedpan, some toilet paper, and a radio in her new box. She spent most of the day and night in confinement beneath the bed. She would only come out at night for a few minutes. In September 1978, Janice gave birth to the second child. She actually gave birth on the waterbed while Colleen was locked in the box below. The following year, Janice got a night job and Cameron worked days. So while Janice was away, Colleen was let out in the evenings to do chores and make dinner for her master. By June 1980, Cameron knew that the fear of the company was enough to keep Colleen in line. So when Janice got a daytime job, they allowed Colleen to babysit the two children by herself. She was afraid that the company was always watching, so she didn't run. She believed that if she was caught, she would be tracked down, tortured, or possibly killed. Cameron also told her that they would find her family and kill them as well. During this stage, she was allowed to asleep in the back bathroom, chained to the toilet. The two children had no idea that Colleen even lived in the same house. By February 1981, Cameron wanted Colleen back in the box under the bed, but Janice said she would work from home to watch over Colleen instead. During this time, Colleen was allowed much more freedom. Still, the threat of the company loomed over her, so she did as she was asked and never tried to escape. To add to that, Colleen was now allowed to work for Janice's employer assembling electronics at home. But Cameron was the one handling the money. She was also required to help Cameron dig a large hole in the yard of the property. The hole was lined with concrete blocks and took 2 years to build. Cameron had big plans for the hole that he hadn't told Janice. To him, this was the dungeon, and he would build a shed over to house more slaves. He had established his power over Janice and now had plans to get 4 more. In 1980, hoping Cameron may treat her better, Colleen told him she loved him and wrote him love letters. She also asked Cameron several times to allow her contact with her family, just to let them know she was okay. Writing these love letters to him actually paid off. And after 4 years, Cameron felt confident, and he knew she was terrified of the company. So he granted her a phone call, but made sure she knew that the company was listening, and that she and her family would be tortured and killed if said the wrong thing. By this time, sadly, her family had lost hope of finding her alive. When she called, her younger sister Bonnie answered the phone. Colleen didn't give her any details, just told her that she was alive and well, and then said goodbye. The family didn't contact the police. They were happy she was alive, but they were still left with many unanswered questions. The first thing they thought was that she was in some kind of a cult, which at the time was a common thing in California. But something interesting happened. Apparently, Cameron, enjoyed letting her talk to her family and giving her bits of freedom. He felt confident in the control he had over her. By February 1981, he told her that he would take her to visit her family. He told her he had to put up a $30,000 deposit with the company to cover extra costs of watching her and her family during the visit. Before the trip, Colleen would need to prove her obedience. He handed her a gun and told her to put it in her mouth and pull the trigger. She did as she was told. So he took her to Riverside, California. But on the way there, they stopped at the company's headquarters. He told Colleen that the company required her to pass a lie detector before she could visit her family. This made her extremely nervous. They arrived at a building in Sacramento and Cameron went inside, leaving Colleen in the car. When he came back, he told her that he talked them into waiving the test, and they continued on their way. Colleen got to visit with her family, and Cameron posed as her boyfriend. He told the family he had a computer seminar in San Diego and he would be back later to pick her up. Now that she was finally alone with her family, she wanted to let her family know the whole truth. She was afraid for her safety and her family's, and she was afraid the company was watching. She stayed overnight with her family, and Cameron picked her up the next day. When they returned to Red Bluff, Janice wasn't home, so he took advantage of this, and actually of Colleen. And then he put her in the box underneath the bed. Cameron made Janice read the Bible to him, especially those passages that mention wives and slaves and to be submissive. Janice had a deep fear of hell and believed that if she didn't obey her husband, she would be damned to the eternal torture of hell. Near the end of 1983, Cameron put Colleen in the hole she had dug in the backyard. She was there day and night and was not to come outside despite the heavy rains making the hole into several inches of mud. She was there for about a week until Cameron suspected that a neighbor kid may have wandered into the backyard and saw Colleen inside the hole. So Cameron brought Colleen back inside and into the box under the bed. Cameron was getting more trusting of his power over Colleen and allowed her increasingly more freedom. By January 1984, he let Colleen out of the box at night, and she was allowed to sleep in the back bedroom. She was allowed to run in the neighborhood and even ride a bike. By May, she began working as a maid at a local hotel in Red Bluff. But she couldn't keep the money. Cameron did. By July 1984, this marked yet another change in this crazy story. And he became more demanding of both ladies. He wanted to basically be with both at the same time. He also wanted alternating nights with them, and neither of them liked this idea, but they felt like they had to obey. Janice had been attending church regularly now and would sometimes bring Colleen with her. In August of 1984, Cameron told Janice of his plans to get more slaves. Janice was deeply upset. The dynamics that they had with alternating nights and the kind of things he wanted to do, she was not happy with. So, on August 9th, Janice dropped Colleen at work and then went to church to speak with her pastor. She told the pastor the horrid story, and he advised for both girls to leave him. Janice then went back to the hotel and told Colleen for the first time that there was no such thing as the company, that it was all a lie, and Colleen believed her. The following day, Janice and Colleen took the two children to Janice's parents' house. Colleen called her father and arranged for him to wire money for a bus fare home. Before she left, though, she called Cameron and told him she knew there was no company and he had no more power over her. So he started crying. For Janice, was a different story. After only a week, she moved back with Cameron, took him to church with her, and encouraged him to attend counseling. The two of them destroyed many of the bondage items over the next month, but Janice hid some of them. Janice had anxiety. She couldn't eat or sleep. So on September 28th, she left once again and moved back in with her parents. The months after Colleen left, she continued to communicate with both Janice and Cameron over the phone and letters. Janice begged her not to go to the police. She said she was trying to help Cameron. Colleen agreed, but at some point Colleen's family pressured her to contact the authorities. Janice was still very afraid of Cameron and worried that he would hurt her or her children. And the pastor advised, I guess it was, to contact the police. Now, you can imagine the faces of the officers when this lady walked into a police station saying that her husband kidnapped a young woman, kept her a slave, tortured her for 7 years. And it's 7 years, it's a little too long. This is a crazy story. So they initially didn't know what to think and doubted her story. Then the police went down to Riverside, corroborated with Colleen. They arrested Cameron. He had several counts. Way too many to count. He pled not guilty to all of them. And at the trial, the prosecution produced over 100 pieces of evidence, including the head box, photos that Cameron had taken of Colleen on the rack, a copy of the contract, rebuild the entire waterbed pedestal and the stretcher inside the courtroom for the jury to see. They even invited jury members to lie inside the box to see what it was like, and some even accepted. In the end, he admitted that he took Colleen that night, but he claimed that later on she was free to go any time she liked and had plenty of opportunities to leave. The defense also presented the love letters that Colleen had written to Cameron and a photo of her at her family's house smiling with her arms around him. So they claim it was consensual. Both prosecutors and the defense brought psychologists. The prosecution psychologist believed Colleen was coerced by fear of the company and did not have the ability to leave. The defense one believed the opposite. In the end, the jury found Cameron Hooker guilty of 10 felony counts. guilty of all but one charge. The last charge of, I think it was because it was a hung jury for the last charge. He was also charged for the murder of Marie, but they didn't have much evidence for that. He got 95 years in prison and a $50,000 fine. Janice Hooker, in return for her testimony, was not charged and was living in California, still under a different name. Colleen has appeared on several TV shows, and a Lifetime movie was made of her story. Because of what happened to her, you think that she look and behave in a different way. However, you can see the strength and her way of coping with this tragedy in her life and the will of sharing her story. Now, this case, it's one of those cases that I absolutely despise talking about. I think that in my head, it kind of triggers something, because I think that's one of the worst things. Yes, there's people that's been taken and killed, and that's it. But what if you have to endure for months this torture? I really don't know how any of these people do it. I remember when I covered the other case that, by the way, Castro was his last name. But I find myself forgetting details of that case that I already covered here, because I think my brain doesn't really want to deal with the case or have any recollection of what some of these people go through. However, I do think that it's important to share this message. These kind of things are not movies, ideas. This is not a Hollywood script. This is very sick people that live among us and are willing to do all this unthinkable, really. I'm glad that Colleen found the strength to deal with this that happened to her. I don't know how she did it, but I think she's an example of how human beings can be relentless and can, move forward after something so traumatic happening to you. I typically want to put myself in the victim's shoes, even sometimes the perpetrator, the family of both. But in this case, I couldn't do that to myself. I think it takes me to a very dark place that I want nothing to do with. And I think that's why it took me this long to finally cover this case. Please let me know what you think about it in the comments down below. I'd appreciate your input and your views, but also remember to keep it respectful. Thank you so much for being here today, and I'll talk to you guys on my next video. Bye guys.